Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 352 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is gratitude. Our quote of the day comes to us from Robert Braith. Gratitude and attitude are not challenges, they are choices. There is still time to grab your ticket for our live event on Saturday, May 14th in Eastchester, New York. For tickets or more information, please reach out to me at chris@noquitliving.com. I had a lot of fun interviewing today's guest. I've watched a bunch of the interviews that Chris Van Vliet has recorded, and I think you will really enjoy hearing from him. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Chris, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Always good to talk to a fellow Chris. Thanks so much for having me on.
As we were saying before, if I forget your name, then we're definitely off to a bad start here.
We've both got a problem then.
So, first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Oh man, that is the goal. That is the goal every single day. So let's make this happen.
We will definitely do it. The number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you yourself have either a no-quit story or perhaps a really challenging time personally or professionally where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Well, I think when you work in broadcasting, that is often, it's a daily, if not weekly occurrence. But one specifically for me, and I'll try to make this story as short as possible. But when I was starting off in the industry, I was working, as you do when you're trying to get your break in broadcasting, you work at a small TV station. So I was working at this small TV station. It was an hour drive from my parents' house. I was working at my high school job at the pet store in the fish department to pay for the gas to get to this job because it wasn't paying enough. And I was a one-man band, as they called it, where you're writing, shooting, reporting, producing, editing your own stories all day. And there's like 3 news stories in a day. So you're racking up all this amazing experience, wearing many, many hats. And I realized I didn't want to do this for a living. And I was trying really, really hard. I wanted to be on TV for a living, but I didn't want to be a news reporter wearing all those hats for a living. So ended up getting a job at MTV2 Canada. And I'm like, this is perfect. I'm 23 years old. This is the big break. I'm going to be interviewing musicians and entertainers and actors and celebrities all day long. It was amazing. And a year into that job, there was a big corporate merger, and our station got bought out by another big media conglomerate. And our show, boom, out of nowhere, got canceled. So I picked up my entire life. I had moved it across the country. I'm from Canada. I'd moved from Toronto to Vancouver, a 47-hour drive in my 1995 Toyota Corolla. I was there for a year, basically my dream job. And out of nowhere, like the rug just got swept out from underneath me. And I had to basically decide, like, what do I do? Do I stay in Vancouver where I don't have a job? Or do I tuck my tail between my legs, go back, drive 47 hours home, move back in with the parents and try to find another job? So that was it for me. And I was collecting unemployment insurance and living at home. It was my job to find a job. And Chris, I was 2 weeks away from the unemployment benefits running out when I finally got another job and was back on TV. But it was 7 months of being unemployed after working the dream job, 7 months of being unemployed. And I just kind of had to stay the course and went, yeah, this is what I want to do for a living. I want to work in broadcasting. And I made it my job to find a job. But there was a lot of days during that time where I went, what am I doing here?
I appreciate you sharing that story, and I think there's a bunch of points in there, but the one that stood out is a 47-hour drive. And I know a bunch of people like, oh, it's a 2-hour drive both way, and it's a long time. But when you talk about it and you break it down into a 47-hour drive, that's a significant drive. Was there one or two things during those 7 months that really impacted you in the sense of allowing you to keep going? Because I think there's that point, and it doesn't matter where it is, where your back's against the wall, and I think you have that time, and you give yourself almost a timeline and say, if this doesn't happen by that point. But was there maybe a book, a mentor, something that you could recommend to our listeners that really helped you stay the course?
I will say that being able to move back in with my parents is kind of a safety net. Like, I love my parents, and they're the greatest demonstration of love and partnership. They've been married for 47 years. They're the best. So the fact that I could say to them, like, hey, this didn't work out, can I come move back in with you? That helped so much. But I think it was the fact for me that it was like, I had this epiphany when I was in my senior year of college. I was studying communication studies just outside of Toronto in a town called Waterloo, Ontario. And I loved going to school, but I had this epiphany in my senior year that when we graduated at the end of that year, it was no more like, do I feel like going to class, or like, where are we getting beers tonight with the boys? It was like, you got to go work for, the rest of your life. And it was in that moment where I went, I don't want to dislike what I do for a living. I don't want to be one of those people who can't enjoy Sunday because Monday's the next day. And it was me going, okay, I'm going to reach out to every radio station, every TV station in my college town, say, I'm passionate about broadcasting. I'm a communication studies major. Can I just come in and see how it's done in the real world? And one radio station brought me in as part of their street team. One TV station in town, had volunteers that did all the behind the scenes jobs. So I went in, I was running cameras, floor directing, VTR. And this other radio station said, we don't take on volunteers, but how would you like a job? And I went, oh, okay. They said, it only pays $8 an hour. I said, that's $8 more than I thought I was going to make. So it was that whole mentality for me of I didn't want to hate what I did for a living. So when my back was up against the wall and I didn't have a job, I went back to that moment and went, why are you doing this? What is your why? And my why wasn't about how much money I was going to make or how many people were going to watch the TV show. It was the fact that I wanted to be able to look forward to what I was going to do every single day. And at the end of the day, be able to go to sleep and go, man, I'm really proud of what I've accomplished.
I think that is awesome, the way you described it. But going back to what you just said about what is your why, and how you described not wanting to have Sunday come and you have that look of, or that thought of, Monday's coming. But, the concept of what is your why, I think has been thrown out so much. And I think it means different things to different people. But for me, the way you just described it, I think identifies the true value of enjoying what you do in life. And I think it's important to note too, you clearly enjoy what you do, and we'll touch on that in a second. But you've also worked hard getting to that point. And I think a lot of people have this fantasy, especially with social media. And I'm curious to get your perspective of just, you find your why. And then the quote, you never work a day in your life. And I think it's not very realistic, because I don't know anybody, including a bunch of the people that you've had on your show, that have a fantastic work life where they're like, it just took me, one phone call and then, I was in and I've never done anything. I think social media doesn't always show the story of working really hard to get to that point. And I think I define it as to earn that point. I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Well, I think that with social media and just media in general, we so often just see the finished product. We don't see all the steps it took for LeBron James to become LeBron James, for Oprah Winfrey to become Oprah Winfrey, for Tom Brady to become Tom Brady. And I think that in the world that you and I are in here with personal development or with podcasting or broadcasting, if you're not going back and watching your speeches from 6 months ago, or your podcast from 6 months ago, or your broadcast from 6 months ago with a total disgust for I thought that was good, then you are moving in the wrong direction here. You should be constantly working to improve every single day. And I think it's important. Find somebody who's doing the thing that you want to do. And maybe they're at step 74 in their journey and you're at step 4. Figure out what all those other steps are, 73, 72, 71, all the way back. And you go, okay, well, he's not that much different. She's not that much different from me. I'm just a little bit further behind.
I think that is so powerful, because it's true what you just said about media. I couldn't agree more. Is you're looking at a finished product. Somebody that I've looked up to in the media world is Gary Vee. And The challenge, I think, that goes along with what you just said is if you look at Gary Vee now, he's pretty verbose and he's got his, I would say, very black and white opinions on certain things. But I went back about 2 years ago and I went down the rabbit hole of some of his early videos about his wine company, and he's literally like night and day. But what I respect more about him, because I did a little bit of that rabbit hole searching, is when he talks about now how he didn't take days off and how he did a video every single day and he was doing it, he actually did. So to your point, if you look at Gary Vee today, the millions and millions of viewers and likes and comments, but it doesn't show, he talks about it to his credit, but it doesn't show the years where he was literally grinding and grinding. I think with social media, and to your point, media in general, it's only showing that end result. And if you're comparing yourself on step 4, like you said, to somebody's 74th step, there's no way you can compare it. But then it becomes that comparison game where, well, Chris is doing this, so I can't do it. Or Gary's doing it, I'll never be at that point. And I think so many people just give up right before they even start.
I think the comparison can be made to if you're playing basketball at the local YMCA, maybe you thought you had a good game, but then you turn on the Lakers game that night and go, wow, LeBron James is really good. It's like you said, it's night and day to compare those two. And I think it's so important to realize where you're at right now, but also to be clear of where you're heading and to celebrate those little goals along the way. So again, if you're at step 4 and that person's at step 74 and that's where you want to be, it's important to go, all right, step 5, woohoo. Okay, step 6, we did it. And to celebrate those little wins along the way. Gary Vee didn't just wake up one day and have millions of followers and, these multi-million dollar companies. It was a lot of hard work, and it didn't happen by accident. I think that's another really important thing to key in on. The people who are the masters at whatever it is that they do, it didn't happen by accident. It was by design, and they figured out a way to get to where they're at now.
I love that. And what you touched on, celebrate the little wins. Maybe a follow-up question is perhaps there's a listener that's listening right now and he or she doesn't fully understand or embrace those little wins. Is there maybe one piece of advice you could give them? Because I think when you focus on the end result, and I'm sure you've done it, I know I've done it sometimes, you get distracted where I think you say, I'm not there yet. And sometimes you don't appreciate or even recognize those small wins. And I think some of those small wins are the most important to get you from point A or step 4 to step 74. So is there maybe one thing that you could possibly suggest to our listeners to really think about focusing on those small wins along the way?
I think it's important to celebrate those small wins, but also to be hungry for what's next. And, to use a sports analogy, you need to realize that the game is not won as a whole. The game is won by each play that goes along. And how many times have you been watching a football game and, the receiver dropped a pass and you went, we would have won the game if he just caught that one pass. Well, what about all the other plays along the way that went, better than they could have? I think it's important to focus on what you do have. And I do this all the time. I wake up every day and I say out loud 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I'm sure you have a practice of gratitude in your life as well, Chris, because so many high achievers do. But I start and end every day saying out loud 3 things that I'm grateful for. And what that does is it puts your focus on the things that you do have in your life rather than focusing on the things that you don't have, because so much of your day will be focused on those things that you don't have, that you're achieving for, that you're striving for. So I think it's important to focus on what you do have, but be hungry for what it is that you're after next.
So I got to ask, just because I'm super curious, is that a practice that you were introduced to? Was it something that happened by default, or is it something that you've been doing for a long time? Because I know for a fact so many of the incredible guests that we've had on our show have been able to pinpoint something that correlates to gratitude, whether it's something in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. But that's the one common denominator with all of the successful people I've spoken to.
I think for me, there was a time when I was commuting. I was living in Miami and I was hosting a TV show there. And I was commuting 40 minutes each way from Fort Lauderdale to Miami. So, it's 80 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes every single day. Add that up, you got 7.5 hours in a week. And like so many people, I would listen to the radio, or I would listen to talk radio, listen to my favorite Spotify playlist. And I realized That's 7.5 hours a week. I could be learning something. And that was when things really clicked in for me. I started listening to more books on tape or audio. What an old term that was, books on tape, audio books or podcasts. And it was just like, it's the idea. And I'm sure that you're very well aware of this, but the idea of a podcast is it's almost as if you've sat down next to people that are at a restaurant next to you and they're having this conversation. You're kind of eavesdropping in on this. And I loved that concept. And it was through some of those podcasts where I realized like, oh, there's just little things I could be doing every single day that would make huge changes, just little adjustments that could make huge changes. And gratitude was a huge one for me.
I love that. And for me, going back to what you said, an old term, Zig Ziglar, who's one of my all-time favorites, he talks about Automobile University. I was just sharing this morning.
Oh, I love that.
With one of my clients that I was listening to a Zig Ziglar video, and he talked about, putting the cassette in your car. And I said, his material is like 99%. It's still on point today as it was whenever he recorded it. I said, all you need to do is just change cassette to podcast or audiobook or a YouTube channel. And I think what people don't realize, and I'm guilty of myself, is taking advantage of some of that, let's call it downtime. And I don't in any way want to put out to the listeners that you have to spend every minute of every day trying to become better. But when you talk about what you just said, 7.5 hours in a car, again, not saying that you have to spend every single minute of those 7.5 hours, but what if you took a course? What if you listened to a podcast? What if there was somebody that was at step 74? The question is, are you going to put the time and effort? And I think we've never been at a time or place in the world we are now where we have access to that information, but you still have to go ahead and put it into play. You have to press play on your phone or on your car. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of people. They think about doing it. They want to do it. They make a note to do it. But then, to your point, they're listening to Spotify or the radio station. And it's like 5 days later, like, what was that thing I wanted to? I don't know. I'll figure it out next week.
And not just access to information, but access to free information. Like, some of the best teachers out there are the teachers you've never heard of that are giving stuff away for free on YouTube. And I love that we live in this world right now where if you want to learn to do anything, and that could be a physical task like, fixing your toilet or something like that, or becoming a better version of yourself. The information is available by typing just a few things into your computer or your phone. But you're right. It's so important to actually make time to do that every single day. So before I go to bed every night, I write out my get to do list. And I love that it's framed as the get to do. These are the things that I get to do the next day. And they can be ridiculous things as simple as go to the gym, or as simple as make this phone call. But at the end of the day, when you've crossed off 18 things, you look at that before you go to bed and you go, man, that's a heck of a day I had. Let's go crush it again tomorrow.
I love it. So I have to ask you, because I've bumped into this with some of my coaching clients, that when they have morning or evening routines, sometimes people have this perspective where it has to be different and it has to be grandiose. But again, talking to some unbelievably successful people from all walks of life, sometimes it's some of the most simplistic things that you're grateful for, or to use your evening routine, that get to. But what if someone's listening and they have that mindset or that block maybe where it's like, well, I got to do new things all the time and it's got to be all these big grandiose things. Do you overlap and repeat things? And if someone's having an issue with that, what do you suggest for them to do? Because I know, like I said, I've bumped into a lot with some of my clients.
I think it is important to switch things up. I just came from boxing classes this morning, and that's something I've been thinking about for a long time. And I went, all right, well, now it's time to finally do this. I've been thinking about it for months. I'm going to actually make the call and make this thing happen. But I also think it's important to if there are certain things in your day that charge you up, maybe you love drinking coffee. It's important. Get that into your system, make that part of your routine, and have that be like a trigger. When I'm drinking my coffee, I can then write out the things I'm grateful for. And maybe take the things in your life that you're always doing. You're going to brush your teeth every morning. You're going to shower every day. Maybe tie that into a new habit that you want to create. Every time you're done brushing your teeth, maybe you tell yourself something in the mirror. Or maybe every time that you're taking a shower, maybe you say out loud the 3 things you're grateful for, something like that. maybe tie in a new habit with one of your daily routines.
I love that. That's some very practical advice, and I think a lot of times people look at taking on like 20 new things at once, and I think it becomes
Yeah.
that paralysis by overanalysis. So I love how you just touched on, tying a new habit to something, and whether it's brushing your teeth or whether it's listening to a new podcast, then all of a sudden you're like, all right, every time I get in my car, I'm going to
Yeah.
listen to a new episode. So speaking of podcast, if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners a little bit about your podcast, but what you also do, but also if you wouldn't mind touching on your very, very impressive YouTube channel as well.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Chris. And thank you for having me on, by the way. This
Thank
is
you. I
great.
appreciate it.
Wherever people are listening to this right now, they can find my podcast called Insight with Chris Van Vliet. And I'm like obsessed with the idea of like finding out how people got to, we keep saying step 74. It was a number I just made up, but I'm obsessed with figuring out how people got to that finished product and reverse engineering back to where we're at now. And selfishly, I want to take some of those clues and apply them to my own life. Because as you know, success leaves clues. So I've been really fortunate to talk to some people who are the best at the best, whether they're in the world of acting, entrepreneurship. I've talked to a lot of, I'm a big wrestling fan. I've talked to a lot of pro wrestlers, a lot of UFC fighters. And my YouTube channel also like springboards off of that as well. And, we're closing in on 300,000 subscribers, and it's just been amazing. I've been so fortunate to be able to talk to, some incredible high performers and to be able to steal just some little things from their life, which has been, it's been pretty great.
You said something that I absolutely love, and success leaves clues. I also believe failure does as well, and it just like both of them, you have the opportunity to learn. So for example, if you're successful at what you do, I can learn from you. If you're not successful in an area, you can also learn from that. But again, it goes back to what we said before, is putting in the time and effort. So I think you'll know the question, but I have to ask you, so of all the interviews and all the people, high performers you've spoken to, is there one or two that just stand out, not from a famous perspective maybe, but just from interviews that you just absolutely loved and you really became a bigger fan of them?
Yeah. So I will tie the wrestling into like the overall thing, because my favorite interview of all time is The Rock. And he was also like, he was my guy when I was growing up. For any wrestling fans out there, it was the Attitude Era at the time, and Rock was my guy. His charisma was so infectious, whether he was in the ring or just talking on the mic outside of the ring. So I was very anxious to meet The Rock because he was at the top of my bucket list. I'd interviewed a lot of celebrities at that point, but he was at the top of my bucket list because he meant so much to the 16-year-old version of me. And they always say you shouldn't meet your heroes, but I mean, if your hero's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, you should do whatever you can to meet him, because he's everything you want him to be. He's kind, he's funny, he's charismatic, but he has this self-awareness about him where he understands he's one of the biggest stars in the world. And he understands that this moment's important for you. And you're going to remember this for better or for worse for the rest of your life. So he does something in that moment to make you feel special. Maybe he'll crack a joke at your expense, or he'll ask you, hey, do you want a photo? Yeah, of course I want a photo, Dwayne Johnson. But he makes it really, really memorable. So The Rock is definitely up there. I also had the opportunity many years ago to speak with Oprah, and she just has this energy about her and this presence about her. Her and Bill Clinton do this thing where they like grab your arm while they're speaking to you, and you're like, oh my God, Oprah's touching me right now. She remembers your name. She uses it, frequently. And it's just something that, just like The Rock story, you remember it and it's memorable. So those are two that I can think of right off the top of my head.
That's awesome. So I have to follow up with, on your bucket list, who's number one or two that you have yet to interview that would be beyond ecstatic to get the opportunity?
So Rock was number one, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Then Tom Cruise was the next one. I'm a huge Tom Cruise fan, and I think he's like the last remaining movie star in the world. Got to interview him. So now I'm like, okay, who is it that we want to talk to next? And like selfishly, there's like 10 more people, 110 more people on that list. But I want to like, I think Elon Musk would be a fascinating conversation. And I'd like to have like 3 hours with someone like an Elon Musk. Also, I've been very inspired by Joe Rogan throughout my entire broadcasting career. I used to tune into Fear Factor just because I thought he was such a great host. And now what he's built, without a network behind him, what he's built on his own is unbelievable. So it'd be great to just pick his brain about that.
He's one of those guys that has just a very interesting story with, UFC background and Fear Factor, and he's created something. But going back to what I do respect about him, just like Gary Vee, and I don't think he does a good enough job in the sense of talking about all the stuff that he did up to this point, because I think from a visual perspective, going back to our earlier part of this conversation, when you look at him now, you're seeing the finished product and you're like, wow, he just signed this insane podcast deal. But you're like, yeah, but didn't you ever see him on Fear Factor at 10:30 at night on a Tuesday when nobody's watching? And I think that's what led him to this point. And that's my point of it, is not to knock him in any way, but he's got a fantastic story of what got him to where he is today. But going back to our conversation, we're looking at the finished product and it's like, oh, well, I could just do that tomorrow and I'll just get a podcast and then, I'll make $100 million and it's because I want to. And it's like, yeah, that's part of it, but it's also the 12-year runway before that.
Well, everybody in podcasting, I think, puts Joe Rogan up there as like, I'd like to be like Joe Rogan one day. It's like, of course, yes. We'd also all like to be as great of a TV host as Ryan Seacrest or as great of a football player as Tom Brady. It's like setting the standard of Joe Rogan is like, shooting for the moon. I always say the best thing about podcasting is anyone can do it. And the worst thing about podcasting is anyone can do it. And it's kind of like a needle in a haystack. Like, what's going to make you stand out? What's going to make your show stand out from everybody else's? And I think what's great about Joe Rogan is he just stayed the course. Like, nobody was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience. And this is with great respect to Joe Rogan. Nobody was listening for episode, 211. So if you're starting out a podcast right now and you're on episode 11 and you're looking at the numbers going, nobody's really here. Well, just stay the course. If you love doing it, if you're passionate about it, and if you love every step of the process, the booking, the guests, the editing, doing the interviews, everything about it, just keep enjoying it. And then when you're at episode 1500, like Joe Rogan, then maybe things will start falling into place.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that whole concept of stay the course is super powerful. A fun question we've been asking, and I know the famous quote by Jim Rohn, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with. If I could grant you dinner with any 5 people, dead or alive, and you could level up and learn from them, who would you pick?
Oh my God. How much time do we have here for me to go?
We'll edit it or make it look really long. Like,
yeah. 5 people. Okay. I'm going to mix it up here with dead and alive. So I'm going to go with Oprah. I have such a tremendous amount of respect for where she came from to the finished product that we see now. Like, her story is unbelievable, and she is the very best to do what she does. So Oprah's at the top of that list. I will put Elon Musk there because I just mentioned him, and I think his story is fascinating. Joe Rogan's going to be in that too. He can help us guide this conversation, and I think that he's brilliant. We'll put Albert Einstein in there. And Nikola Tesla. Wow, what a dinner this is.
I'd like to serve drinks or dessert or just take the orders if that's possible.
To be there.
I think between Tesla and Einstein and Elon Musk, that would be just a fascinating conversation for them to talk about, why the company's called Tesla and all those other stuff that goes into it, where most people don't fully know the reasoning behind it. And I think it would be just fascinating to have those 5 people plus yourself, and I'm going to throw myself in there, so it'll be a 7-person.
Yeah, I'll go out to the bathroom, and then you can take my spot.
I'll be like, no, it's the second Chris that we're just taking.
That's right.
Substitute. So since you touched on audiobooks, and I'm curious, and I believe in the power of books and the value of books, and I'm curious if you've read anything recently, or perhaps you're currently reading something that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
There's a bunch of books, but I think the one that's been the most powerful for me is The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. That one has been so powerful in just framing what you do every single day and realizing that it's not life or death. Sometimes you can say no to certain things. And it's not the idea of like not giving an F about everything. It's about like being particular about like, I'm going to say yes to this, but not care about this other thing. Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck is a brilliant, brilliant book. And it really makes you realize that there is a huge difference between the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. So those are two books that I always recommend.
I think both of those books are very good books, and I think the whole concept behind mindset is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I think that's something that we should teach to kids at a young age, and not from a,
Yes.
saying, again, I enjoy that book. I'm not saying that book in particular, but just the concept of, do you have a growth mindset or do you have a fixed mindset? Because I think if we introduce that concept to kids at a young age, it might spur on different things. And obviously everybody's not gonna relate to it, but I think there are those people that just hear something and all of a sudden it clicks differently than traditional learning. So we're going to switch over to what we call our hot seat questions. And the only request we have of you is you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Last meal, you can pick absolutely anything. What do you pick?
Pizza. Pizza's my kryptonite.
Favorite smell?
It's got to be. I'm big on like sweet smells, and I spend far too much time at Bath and Body Works, like smelling all their candles. And now I just ordered 6 of them, so it's like something. I can't narrow it down to like a specific smell, but like a Bath and Body Works candle. Pick any scent, really.
Today's episode is sponsored by Bath and Body Works. What is your all-time favorite sport?
To watch or to play?
Either or, you pick.
To play baseball. I've played baseball for most of my life. To watch now, it's football. I'm a big Browns fan, which was very difficult for many years. I lived in Cleveland for 5 years. Big Browns fan. They're getting better.
Favorite team?
The Cleveland Browns.
Do you have an all-time favorite movie?
Back to the Future is the greatest movie of all time.
I love how you preface that. Of all the interviews I've done, nobody has ever prefaced that answer at answering and then saying greatest movie of all time.
Back to the Future is the perfect movie. It's the greatest movie of all time.
I have to agree to disagree. Few Good Men is the greatest movie, but that's just my
You
opinion.
can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth. Do you have an all-time favorite book?
I'll say The Subtle Art because I've read it so many times and just it's so well written. Mark Manson is an incredible author. It's so well written, and there's always these nice little constant reminders of like, oh yeah, that's such a simple thing that I should be doing every day.
And I love that you touched on that because so many people have talked about rereading a book, and for many different reasons. But what you just said is those little reminders. What is the favorite app you have on your phone?
I'd say the app I use the most is Instagram. I don't know if it's my favorite app, but it's the app I use the most.
What's the background picture on your phone?
So this is actually interesting. I change it frequently because I think that we get stuck in the idea of looking at our phone and, whether it's a photo of your husband or wife, of your kids, of your pet, of a beautiful scenery, whatever it is. I think that we get like the sensory adaptation to it because we're so used to seeing it because we unlock our phone hundreds of times a day. So I actually change the background photo on my phone every week so that you look at it and you go, oh yeah, I forgot I changed it to that. So I will show you. I took this photo last night on a hike. That's the wisdom tree in Los Angeles. Now the sun was setting.
That's an awesome picture.
Yeah. So I change it up. Sometimes it's a quote. Sometimes it's a beautiful scenic shot, but it's a great thing to kind of test your brain and go, oh yeah, forgot I switched that out.
And the visual aids are things that I talk a lot with my clients about. And I actually have a different picture on my phone and my iWatch because I want to see different things, to your point about looking at it.
I like
so
that.
You just said it might be a quote. Have to ask, do you have a favorite quote?
I think my favorite quote is vague goals get vague results. And it's so important to have specific goals and know what you're heading towards. Like imagine you got in a car with vague goals, you'd be driving around. You have nowhere that you're headed. So vague goals get vague results. Specific goals get specific results.
That's a fantastic quote. And then do you have, or what is that one song, no matter whenever you hear it, you automatically tune it up and just rock out to it?
Oh, that changes day to day and week to week. It also changes on, and you know this, based on the mood that you're in.
This is going to decide our friendship moving forward. Just so be careful here.
This is going to be a dangerous, deep cut here, but I am a huge pop punk fan. and like Yellow Card, Starting Line, Dangerous Summer, Senses Fail, all those Hawthorne Heights, all those bands were like the soundtrack to those formidable years of like 16 to like 23. So when when Ocean Avenue by Yellow Card comes on, it takes me to such a specific place and a specific time in my life. And it's just like, oh yeah, I'm 19 in my college dorm room again. I like this.
If we could go back to that, I would go back to that 19 college dorm. So for listeners who want to connect with you, follow you, what's the best way for them to do so? And please also tell them the best way to get, again, your podcast as well as your YouTube channel.
So wherever you listen to this, you can find my podcast, Insight with Chris Van Vliet. And it'd be so great if you could follow or subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review for not only my show, but for Chris's show as well. And you can find me on social media at Chris Van Vliet. And that's also the name of my YouTube channel. So VANVLIET.
Awesome. And then last question we have for you is the same question we ask everybody, is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
I think it's what's behind me right here. It's be great and be grateful. And if you can be grateful, you'll live a great life. So that, and also a huge thank you to you, Chris. Not only do you have a great first name, but this was highly entertaining and I loved this. So thank you so much for sharing some time, sharing some of your time with me today.
I appreciate it. Please tell your parents you have a fantastic name as well.
It is my grandfather's name. I was named after him.
I was named after your grandfather too. That's so weird.
Wow, it's crazy.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. And for our listeners, please follow Chris. If you have not listened to his podcast or his YouTube channel, please subscribe to that as well. Subscribe to his podcast, but definitely check it out because he's got some incredible guests. And I hope that you and I can connect again soon.
I'd love to. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to episode number 352. To end today's episode, I will challenge our listeners to be grateful. I challenge each of you to both express and show gratitude towards someone in your life. Make sure you go crush it today, and remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.